The inflatable canoe bucked hard, as if it had struck a rock. Zanele Ndlovu felt the tube collapse under her right arm and heard the hiss of air leaving the pontoon. Before she could understand why the boat was suddenly sinking, something heavy hit again from below and tore at the side of the craft. The river that had seemed predictable a second earlier turned violent at arm's length. She looked down and saw the shape rising, thick, armored, and fast, and then teeth closed on her upper arm and yanked. She went into the water on the crocodile's pull, the collapsing canoe twisting between her and the others. The bite was not a single snap. It was a clamp that held and dragged, trying to take her under. Zanele fought for the surface as the punctured canoe rolled and her fiancé, Jamie Fox, was thrown out on the opposite side. For a moment, that half-deflated boat became a barrier and a lifeline at once, keeping them separated while the crocodile tried to turn her into a weight. They had been on a guided canoe trip on the Upper Zambezi River near Victoria Falls in Zimbabwe, a short outing meant to feel safe and ordinary. Zanele was 25, a former tennis player, and she and Jamie were days from getting married. The plan was simple: paddle, laugh, and return with memories that belonged to the living. The crocodile changed that plan in seconds. The animal came up with enough force to puncture the inflatable canoe before latching onto her arm. Zanele felt the craft sag beneath her as air escaped. She had no time to shift her weight, no time to grab for a stable brace. The crocodile bit hard enough to tear tissue and bone, and the shock of it robbed the pain of shape at first. Her mind reached for explanations, snagged branches, hidden rocks, anything except what her eyes were seeing. Then the animal pulled, and the river started filling her ears. Jamie came up from the water and saw her struggling. He did not have space to think through options. He swam toward her as she fought to keep her mouth above the surface. The crocodile stayed locked on her arm, pulling down and twisting. Jamie grabbed her around the waist and started punching the crocodile's head and snout, striking wherever his fists could land. Zanele's other hand took injuries of its own as she tried to push off the animal and the collapsing boat at the same time. The guides reacted immediately. They maneuvered their canoes in, shouting, reaching, trying to get a grip on Zanele without losing their own balance as the inflatable craft continued to deflate from the puncture. For a moment, everyone was working in the same cramped space on the water, close enough to be bitten themselves, close enough to feel the animal's power through Zanele's body as it tried to drag her away. What saved her was not a single heroic move, but several people refusing to let go at the same time. Jamie kept his arms locked around her torso. The guides grabbed and pulled, using the canoe edges as leverage. The crocodile's grip finally loosened enough for Zanele to be hauled toward the boats. When she came free, her body tried to fold into shock. Her arm was torn badly, and blood ran down her side and into the river. She stayed conscious, but everything narrowed to survival. Keep breathing, keep her face above water, keep moving toward the hands pulling her out. They got her into a canoe and paddled fast, balancing speed with the knowledge that the same water still held the same danger. The scene on the river was not cinematic. It was practical and desperate. Hands shaking, voices clipped, equipment suddenly useless in places where it mattered. Jamie stayed close, soaked and trembling, talking to Zanele as if steady words could keep her anchored to the present. Zanele fought to stay awake, feeling the cold weight of shock press down on her thoughts. Once they reached help, the reality of her injuries became unavoidable. It was not a question of stitches. Doctors worked to save her life first, and the decision became stark. Her arm could not be saved. The amputation was not the end of the ordeal. It was the price of surviving it. Zanele woke to a new body and a new set of problems that arrived all at once: pain, grief, uncertainty, and the strange silence that followed a moment that should have killed her. News of the attack spread because the details were so blunt. A crocodile had punctured an inflatable canoe, seized her arm, dragged her into the river, and she had lived. People far from Zimbabwe read the story because it did not fit the expected shape of survival. She had not escaped with a few stitches. She had survived by losing part of herself. Reports described Jamie punching the crocodile while guides pulled her free, and how the boat deflated as the attack unfolded. In the hospital, Zanele and Jamie faced a decision that was intensely private and unavoidably public. Their wedding was scheduled for days later. They could postpone, disappear into recovery, and let the world move on. Or they could hold on to the one piece of the future that still belonged to them. Zanele chose to get married as planned. 5 days after the attack, she walked down the aisle in a hospital chapel. The venue was smaller than the one they had imagined, but the meaning was sharper. Bandages covered what was left of her arm, and injuries marked her other hand from the struggle in the water. She moved carefully, still recovering, but she stood upright. She smiled in photographs that did not pretend nothing had happened. If the crocodile had taken her arm, it had not taken her life, and it had not taken her choice to keep moving forward. The survival was not a clean victory. It was surgery, pain, and a future reshaped overnight. It was learning how to do ordinary things again, while the river replayed without warning. The hiss of air, the sudden sag of the boat, the weight pulling down, the brief terror of realizing she could vanish beneath the surface and never come back. It was also gratitude. Gratitude that Jamie reached her when he did, that the guides moved when they did, and that she did not drown in the seconds when the crocodile tried to roll her under. When people asked how she could celebrate anything after losing an arm, her answer stayed close to the truth of that day. They had kept their lives. The river had taken what it could, but it had not finished the job. And in the blunt, unforgiving way survival often worked, that was enough to build a marriage on, and a second life after the first one ended in the water. In the weeks that followed, the fight shifted from the river to recovery. Zanele had to relearn balance and strength without the arm she had relied on her whole life, sitting through wound care, therapy, and the slow work of adapting. Jamie, who had watched the crocodile pull her under, carried his own version of the aftermath, replaying the instant he saw her in the water and the instant his hands found her again. When they spoke about what happened, the message was consistent. They were grateful to be alive, and they understood, in a way that could not be explained to someone who had never seen a predator at close range, how thin the line was between an outing and a disappearance. Thank you for listening to Horrifying Survival Stories. Subscribe for more stories of those who faced the impossible and lived.